Hey everybody, Cole here with Classic Mini DIY, and on today's episode I'm going to show you guys how to install a rear roll cage in a Classic Mini, so stay tuned, you won't want to miss it. Hello everybody and welcome back to Classic Mini DIY. Now if you're looking at the car behind me and wondering why there's so much different from the last video you saw, that is because we're in the future. And I filmed a lot of the assembly of the car already, but I don't have that video ready. But I wanted to take a moment and release a video talking just about the rear roll cage in my Classic Mini. Now to be completely straightforward with y'all, this is not really a job that I have been looking forward to doing. This roll cage, getting it both out of the car and in the car, is not a very easy job and requires a few specialized tools, especially the installation process. So why is that, and what are we gonna have to do in order to get this roll cage into the backside of my Classic Mini? Well, you're gonna need two tools. One of those tools is sitting on the floor over here, and I'll get to that in a minute, but the other item you're going to need is a set of good, nicely lubricated, relatively recently used ratchet straps. Now, you won't wanna use some crappy old ratchet straps because you are gonna be putting a lot of tension on this, and in order to get this roll cage into the Mini, you actually have to take the roll cage, put it into the kind of front space of the car, and then ratchet the arms together. This is because the shape of the Mini is kind of like a wedge, and as a result of that, in order to get it into the back pockets of the car and onto the rear arches of the wheels, or I guess the inner fenders, whatever you want to call them, in order to get this in there, you actually have to pull it together. This is really strong steel. And this roll cage is one that was made here in the US by a wonderful group that does VTEC conversions down in South Carolina. That's Minitech. You guys probably know about them. They make all sorts of different, Honda swap subframes that are used by a lot of different high profile Honda swap companies. So Minitech has been secretly or not so secretly creating subframes for a lot of the Honda conversions that you guys see out on the road today. Anyways, let's talk about the other tool that is sitting on the ground right over here. This tool is what's called a professional hydraulic body repair kit. And this is from Harbor Freight, but you guys might have also heard them referred to as Porta-Powers, portable hydraulic presses. Essentially, it is a single hydraulic piston with some attachments on the end that we're going to be able to use in order to press this back apart after it's in place in the rear of the car. So we have to bring it together to get it back there, and then release that ratchet strap, and then take the porta press and press it back apart. Now, for those of you who have friends, unlike me, sad, I have no friends, you could probably do this with two people pushing on it while threading in the bolts in the back of the car. I would say that that is probably pretty difficult and not something that I would say is the easiest way to do it. These tools, I will say, do have a return policy. Just going to leave that out there, let you know that that exists for Harbor Freight. And there are probably places around you that might rent these out or have loaner programs you can get one of these. So if you need this tool, you're not going to use it a lot, probably won't. It's a pretty specialized tool. There are some options for you. First thing that we need to do is get these doors open, because you can see the doors have been mounted. Open up this space, kind of get us some working area in order to really get this in there and, have some room to move around. Also, we're going to remove my new steering wheel. I'm going to cover that steering wheel in a future episode that's about the assembly. So you'll get a little sneak peek. You can see it here. It's from Momo, but I'm not going to go too deep into that today. All right, so now we have hard part number 1 done. The next part is pressing this apart and getting it in place and bolting it in. So I'm lucky that this roll cage came out of this car before, and you can probably see on the side there, just peeking through, those are the existing holes we drilled for this. Now, we pressed this apart and then drilled the holes and then ran the bolts through the last time we did this. This time, we're gonna have to do something similar, except these top bolt holes are already in place. So what we're gonna do is, if we can, kind of shift this over enough to where I can get at least, well, probably won't be able to just because this has been tensioned together so much. But we'll have to press this apart. I'll slide the bolts in, release the hydraulic pressure, and then we'll have those top bolts in. Now, as far as the floor panel goes, or the ones that go down into the door pocket, I'll cover those in just a minute. I have to drill new holes for those ones because we did a lot of metal work in the floor. All right, so now we're looking at our portable hydraulic press here. And as you can see, on this side is the actual hydraulic. This is the piston that you'd pump up. This is gonna live outside the car. You have an extension hose. This runs to your piston, which is this lovely little unit here. It's very heavy. And what this does is, well, it presses itself apart. So if we go ahead and attach this hydraulic to our piston, now we have our hydraulic piston connected. And as we pump this up, you can see this piston is spreading apart. And that's the whole concept behind this, is that you have hydraulic pressure pressing the whole roll cage apart. Now, there's a relief valve over here. There's little like rubber attachments, all sorts of different things you can use. Now, for our setup, we're gonna have to kind of it would be ideal if we had 2 of these, so we could put it on 2 ends. So you'd have one end on your, on one part of the roll cage, and then you'd have another one of these to kind of mount around the other. Unfortunately, this setup does not have that, but we also have our extension bars. So this goes into one end or the other, and that makes the bar longer so it can fit in between those 2 things. So first things first, we really just need to get this in place. And I think the easiest way to do that, well, I don't know that there's an easy way, but let's see what we can figure out. One thing I do want to talk about real quickly before I get this started is that the bolts we are using are all grade 8. This is a bolt-in rear roll cage, which means that it needs bolts and holes in order to do this. The kit comes with plates in order to spread the load into the wheel well as well as the bottom part of your car. But if the body of your car has damage, it's rusty, this is not something that I would recommend installing in your car. The bolts we're going to be using are zinc plated, and this is a grade 8 bolt. You are going to want something that's super strong so that, well, it holds it in place safely. Anyways, let's get this going. All right, so now that we have the roll cage in place, it's porta-pressed out. We put the bolts in for the upper part of the roll cage. If you didn't have holes there already, you would have had to drill those when the porta-press is extended. So you'd have pressure on it, expanding it out. You'd find the placement for those holes that you want and drill through the wheel wells. Now, the plates that go in underneath here that kind of spread the load into the wheel well, you saw those just a minute ago. I would strongly recommend putting a bit of gasket sealer on the back side of those to help prevent water ingress as this wheel is spinning and flinging water up in there. That'll help keep those wheel wells nice and dry. Pretty unlikely that water is going to make it past all of the tightened bolts and everything up into the car, but there's no reason not to take a little bit of extra precaution. Now, the last thing that we're going to do is drill the holes for the front. Now, this is really difficult for me to show you guys. So essentially what we've done is porta-press the front arms out. So those are pressed out just like we did on the rears. And now they are kind of seated where they want to be on this new portion of metal that's been welded into my car. This whole portion right here was replaced in my car for a couple reasons. One is it was kind of rotted. The other portion is that I knew I was going to be putting this roll cage back in here. And the Classic Mini's metal is not exactly thick, it's not super strong. And so the roll cage in the back is only going to be as strong as what it mounts to. And so what we've done is welded in thicker steel for a whole quadrant right here. So it kind of starts right about there and ends back here. That new metal is in place, it's been painted, all the same stuff the rest of the car has. And we're going to be able to drill through that to mount our new grade 8 bolts here. So unfortunately, at the hardware shop where I'm at, the bolts that I have available to me are both a little too short and a little too long. So I bought the longer ones. We're going to get those in, and then what we'll do is angle grind the excess off so I don't have a whole bunch of big old bolts sticking out the bottom here, and it looks a little bit more flush and factory. So there's a key difference between the spreading plate that's on your wheel well and the one that's up here in your door pocket. And that's this right here. So you can see this is the one that goes for the front arms because it has 4 bolt holes. And this gets mounted right up about there, and this is what spreads the load and helps reinforce that even more. What I would recommend doing is drilling the 2 holes that you can get your drill down and into from the door pocket, which will be the ones that are on this side, nearest to the rear arms. That'll go down, drill 2 holes straight down, exactly where it's, kind of contacting the car. You'll then put this plate up in place, and then you're going to drill the other 2 holes using those other ones as reference. This is going to make sure that all 4 of those holes line up. The only thing else I would recommend is using a slightly enlarged drill bit so you can drill a slightly larger hole, and that's going to give you just a little bit of play in order to kind of line these up properly. It's a combination of things to all make this fit nicely, and I'll leave the camera on. I don't know that it's going to be very exciting, this portion of the drilling, but let's see what we can get. Okay, so there's only one more thing I want to show you guys, and this is really something that is specific to my setup, but it's something that you can do if you decide to put a roll cage in your car. So on the Mark I, there was no factory seat belt. My car was so early that there were no seat belts in this car. There were no holes for it, there was nothing. Later on, they introduced a lap belt, and then of course in later Minis, they introduced a full 3-point harness. In my car, I'd like to have a 3-point harness because it is the safest thing that we can run on this car aside from like a full race harness. And I think that would kind of take away from the look and feel of the car. So what I did prior to sending this off to paint was I worked with my buddy and he helped me weld in some reinforcement plates down in the bottom of the door pocket. So basically just cut this out, welded in reinforcements. That was done by the wonderful shop that helped me, that did all of my metal work. And then I bought a couple of things off of Amazon. They're pretty cool, and basically they are steel sleeves that are threaded. It's a strong EN24T steel, if I remember correctly, and essentially what you do is you drill a hole directly through your roll cage, straight through, so center to center, and then the steel sleeve slides in. It has a stopper on one side, and this pokes out. You can see I've got a little nub here that's threaded. And this is for seatbelt mounts. It's made specifically for it. I'll post a link to these in the description. They were really cool. And then we welded those in and then ground the back side of them nice and flush. And then my paint guy helped me by filling this in with a little bit of body filler. But at the end of the day, what that allows us to do is have a 3-point harness, which you can see here. And this is going to run directly into that sleeved unit at the top there. So let's go ahead and take all this stuff out. Basically just had the bolts in there, and you can see we're gonna have a full working seatbelt here. So I'm gonna go ahead and thread this all the way in. Let's see if this bolt is actually too long. This is another bolt I bought. Nah, we're gonna be good. These bolts I also purchased off of Amazon. They're made specifically for the strength of a seatbelt. It's made to be safe. And when you are working with seatbelts, something that you are going to want to keep in mind is that seatbelts do have like an expiration date. So if your seatbelts are past their expiration, you're going to want to go ahead and just replace those. They are kind of a no-brainer. This is what keeps you safe in a crash. There's no reason to skimp on that. There's lots of other areas that you can save some money. Seatbelts are not one of them. So let's go ahead and screw this all the way in. Seatbelt number 1 installed. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and then we'll be pretty much done. So once that's installed, let me just give you guys a good look at what it looks like once it's in. All right, everybody, that is another thing installed and ready for use in Bad Wolf Mini. I'm very excited to have this done. This has been sitting out in the garage in the way for weeks and weeks and weeks now, so I'm very happy to have this back in the car. And it's so solid. I mean, those 12 bolts that hold this in are all grade 8 into solid steel, and it is very solid. It kind of gives you a little extra peace of mind when you're driving the car. The car itself is obviously not super safe as it is, but anything we can do to help that is something that is worth it in my book. So in the next episode, I think we're going to get the last of the interior items in, so carpet, front seats, all of those different things. We're going to get our parcel shelf in, we're going to get the kickboard in underneath the rear seats, and the inside is going to look a lot more finished. We have a few secret things that we're working on in relation to the engine. I can't wait to share those with you, but for right now, we aren't going to be able to make much more progress on the engine, but lots and lots left to do. I can't wait to share it with you guys. So anyways, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for joining. Thanks for coming along on this project, and until I see you guys on the next one, you know the drill. Enjoy those minis and motor on. See y'all later.